those women over whom wars were fought. There are 5 famous women in history over whom bloody wars were waged. These wars led to tremendous bloodshed and destruction. One woman was in present-day Greece, and the second was in Egypt. 2 women belonged to India, and 1 woman was in Sindh, which is now in present-day Pakistan. Let us know about these 5 remarkable women. The first woman on this list is Sita. She belonged to ancient India. She was the consort of Ram, the avatar of the god Vishnu in the Hindu religion. Sita was known for her dedication, self-sacrifice, courage, and purity. She was the adopted daughter of King Janaka of Videha. In her youth, she chose Ram, the prince of Ayodhya, as her husband in a swayamvar, a type of marriage in ancient India where a woman used to choose a man as her husband from a group of suitors. The word swayamvar is a combination of 2 words. Swayam means self, and ver means husband, so it means she herself chooses husband. On the appointed day, suitors would gather at the venue and declare their qualifications. The bride would place a garland on the man of her choice and select him as her husband. During the ceremony, Sita put a condition that she would marry only that person who would possess the strength to string the pinaka, a very strong bow of Hindu deity Lord Shiva. Many princes attempted and failed to string the bow. Ram also participated in the ceremony, and when the bow was brought before him, Ram seized the center of the weapon, fastened the string taut, and broke it in 2 in the process. This impressed Sita, and she chose Ram as her husband. The couple returned to Ayodhya. Ram, being the eldest, was heir to the throne, but his stepmother, Kaikeyi, Ram's stepmother, compelled her husband to nominate Bharat as heir to the throne in place of Ram, reminding him of his old promise. Bharat was her son and the younger brother of Ram. Kaikeyi also asked Ram to leave Ayodhya and spend 14 years of exile in the forests. Sita and Ram's other stepbrother, Lakshman, willingly renounced the comforts of the palace and joined Ram in exile. Looking at his mother's pettiness, Bharat was aghast, and he refused to accept the kingdom. He proceeded to self-exile until Ram returned, as retribution for her mother's silliness. During exile, Sita was kidnapped by Ravun, the king of Lanka, disguising himself as a mendicant. Ram gathered forces to attack Lanka. Meanwhile, Ravun harassed Sita to be his wife. Sita refused him, which enraged Ravun. Ram reached Lanka. A war was waged in which Ram destroyed the whole of Lanka, killed Ravan, defeated his forces, and brought Sita back to her home. The second woman over whom a war was fought was Helen of Troy. This war is called the Trojan War in history, and it was a legendary conflict in Greek mythology that took place around the 12th or 13th century BC over the city of Troy. The Trojans refer to the inhabitants of the city of Troy. The war was waged by the Achaeans, meaning Greeks, against the city of Troy, after Paris, a prince of Troy's ruling family, seduced Helen and brought her to Troy, leaving behind her husband, Menelaus, king of Sparta, infuriated. Helen was said to have been the most beautiful woman in the world. She was the daughter of King Tyndareus and his wife, Leda. When the time came to marry Helen, many suitors came to ask for Helen's hand. Her father, Tyndareus, was afraid to select a husband for his daughter or send any of the suitors away, for fear of offending them and giving grounds for a quarrel. The Greek legendary hero Odysseus was one of the suitors but had brought no gifts because he believed he had little chance of winning the contest. He proposed that, before the decision was made, all the suitors should swear a solemn oath to defend the chosen husband against whoever should quarrel with him. This oath is known as the Oath of Tyndareus. A competition between her suitors for her hand in marriage was held, and Menelaus emerged victorious. When Helen married Menelaus, she was still very young. After hearing about the legendary beauty of Helen, Paris desired to visit Sparta to see Helen. According to myth, before this journey, Paris had been appointed by Zeus to judge which was the most beautiful goddess among the goddesses Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite. To earn his favor, Aphrodite, the Greek goddess of sexual love and beauty, promised Paris the most beautiful woman in the world. Swayed by Aphrodite's offer, Paris chose her as the most beautiful of the goddesses, earning the wrath of Athena and Hera goddesses. Paris came to Sparta in the guise of a member of a diplomatic mission. He seduced Helen, and she eloped with him to Troy. At that time, Menelaus was not in the town, as he had left for Crete to bury his uncle, Creatius. On his return, when he found that his wife had been taken away by Paris, he called upon all the competing suitors to fulfill the oath of Tyndareus, thus beginning the Trojan War. All the suitors honored their oath and joined him to bring Helen back from Troy. The Trojan War, which was punctuated by battles and skirmishes, lasted for 10 years. It finally ended when the Greeks played a stratagem. They retreated from camp and sailed away to the nearby island, just to hoodwink the Trojans. They left behind a giant wooden horse outside the gates of Troy. The horse as animal was sacred to the Trojans. The wooden horse was part of a plan made by Odysseus to end the war. The wooden horse was hollow in the middle, and soldiers led by Odysseus were placed inside it. Inside the city of Troy, there were two opinions on whether to bring the wooden horse inside the city or not. Ultimately, on prodding by Sinon, who was a spy of Greeks inside the city of Troy, the horse was brought into the city. The Trojans were satisfied that the Achaeans had left the war and returned to their kingdoms. However, in the middle of the night, the Greek soldiers opened up latches from inside the horse, came out, and opened the gates of the city of Troy. The Greek army had already been waiting for the doors to be opened. They entered the city and killed the sleeping people of Troy. A great massacre followed, which continued into the day. The Trojans, fueled with desperation, fought back fiercely, but being disorganized and leaderless, they all fell. The Greeks then burned the city and divided the spoils. Menelaus intended to kill Helen, but overcome by her beauty, he threw down his sword and took her to the ships. The third such woman in history is the famous Egyptian queen Cleopatra, who also had legendary beauty. She was born in 70 or 69 BC in Alexandria, Egypt. She was the daughter of King Ptolemy XII and the last queen of the Macedonian dynasty that ruled Egypt between the death of Alexander the Great in 323 BC and its annexation by Rome in 30 BC, a roughly 300-year period. The dynasty had been founded by Alexander's general Ptolemy, who became King Ptolemy I, Soter of Egypt, after Alexander's generals distributed his empire after the latter's death. When Cleopatra's father, Ptolemy XII, died in 51 BC, the throne passed to his young son, Ptolemy XIII, and daughter, Cleopatra VII. The 18-year-old Cleopatra, older than her brother by about 8 years, became the dominant ruler. Soon after, differences arose between sister and brother, and Cleopatra was forced to flee Egypt for Syria, where she raised an army and, in 48 BC, returned to face her brother at Pelusium, on Egypt's eastern border. The murder of the Roman general Pompey by a Roman soldier of Ptolemy XIII's army, and the arrival of Julius Caesar brought temporary peace. Cleopatra realized that she needed Roman support, or more specifically, Caesar's support, if she was to regain her throne and, if possible, to restore the glories of her dynasty. Caesar sought money for repayment of the debts incurred by Cleopatra's father as he struggled to retain his throne. These interests brought both parties closer, and they became lovers. Caesar gave her much-needed support, and with Roman reinforcements, she took on her brother Ptolemy XIII, who fled and subsequently drowned in the Nile. Cleopatra, now married to her other brother, Ptolemy XIV, was restored to her throne as co-ruler along with her brother. Cleopatra's marriages with her brothers were only ceremonial and needed for continuing the throne in the family. They did not sleep together as husband and wife. Soon, Caesar took control of Rome in 46 BC. Cleopatra exerted immense influence over Caesar. She paid at least one state visit to Rome. She was accommodated in Caesar's private villa beyond the Tiber River. Cleopatra was in Rome when Caesar was murdered in 44 BC. Soon after her return to Alexandria in 44 BC, Cleopatra's co-ruler, Ptolemy XIV, died. Cleopatra now ruled with her infant son, Ptolemy XV. After Caesar's assassination, Mark Antony, Lepidus, and Octavian formed a triumvirate in Rome and ruled together. Octavian was Caesar's great-nephew and heir. Antony, now controller of Rome's eastern territories, which also included Egypt, sent for Cleopatra so that she might explain her role in the aftermath of Caesar's assassination. She met with Mark Antony, loaded with gifts and dressed in the robes of the Isis goddess. Antony was mesmerized and fell in love with her. He soon returned to Alexandria, where he treated Cleopatra not as a protected sovereign, but as an independent monarch. She bore him 3 children. The Roman triumvirate developed differences. Antony left Alexandria and returned to Italy, where he was forced to conclude a temporary settlement with Octavian. As part of this settlement, he married Octavian's sister, Octavia, but he was completely under the spell of Cleopatra's beauty. 3 years later, Antony was convinced that he and Octavian could never come to terms. His marriage to Octavia was now irrelevant, so he divorced her in late 33 BC, returned to the east, and reunited with Cleopatra. This abandonment of Octavia in favor of Cleopatra proved a last straw to break the camel's back. Now open hostilities between Mark Antony and Octavian erupted, and the latter defeated the combined forces of Antony and Cleopatra on 2 September 31 BC in the Battle of Actium. Antony and Cleopatra fled to Egypt. Cleopatra retired to her mausoleum as Antony went off to fight his last battle. Receiving the false news that Cleopatra had died, Antony fell on his sword. In a last show of devotion, he had himself carried to Cleopatra's retreat, where he died, after advising her to make peace with Octavian. When she learned that Octavian planned to bring her to his Roman triumphal procession as a prisoner, and to disgrace her, she killed herself using an asp, a venomous snake, and a symbol of divine royalty. She was 39 years of age, and had been a queen for 22 years, and Antony's partner for 11 years. Both were buried together, according to their last wish. The 4th woman on this list is Princess Bagal, commonly known as Bhagi of the Sumro dynasty of Sind. This dynasty ruled over the Sind area from 1026 to 1351 AD, which is now a part of Pakistan. This dynasty's ruler, King Bhungar, had 2 sons, namely the eldest Chanizer and the younger Dodo, and a daughter, Bagal Bai. After the death of King Bhungar, a dispute arose over the throne. It is said that after the death of Bhungar, the nobles approached Chanizer, being the eldest, to ascend to the throne, but he asked for time to consult his mother. This infuriated the nobles, who, perceiving Chanizer as a weak person, chose his younger brother Dodo as their new ruler. A seething Chanaysar left for Delhi and sought the aid of Sultan Alauddin Khilji, the ruler of the Delhi Sultanate. In return, Chanizer would acknowledge the Delhi Sultan as his suzerain and also marry his sister to Khilji. The Sultan agreed, and a large army led by General Zafar Khan invaded Sind. Sultan Dodo and his nobles rebuffed the negotiation attempts, as Chanizer's promise to marry his sister to a casteless foreign ruler was beneath contempt. Despite the heroic defense, Sind's army was destroyed, and Sultan Dodo fell, taunting Chanizer even as he was being impaled high on Khalji spears. Most of the noblewomen, including Princess Bahagi, were evacuated from the capital and placed under the protection of Jam Abro Sama, a prominent lord from the Sama clan. Zafar Khan sacked the capital and planned to capture the princess to present her to Khilji. Then, understanding the vile nature of the invaders, Chanizer also turned on them and died fighting. The Sultanate's army then laid siege to Jam Abro's fortress, and the latter chose death over dishonor. With the assent of the women inside, Jam Abro set fire to the fortress and rode out to fight to the death. The victorious Khilji army entered the fortress, and all they found were ruins and charred bones. The aghast Zafar Khan retreated to Delhi, lamenting the futility of it all and deeply mourning the dead. The fifth and last woman on this list is Padmavati, a princess of the Singhal kingdom in India and the daughter of King Gandharvsen. She was a paragon of beauty. The Chittor's ruler, Rathee, heard about it and, inspired by the description of Padmavati's beauty, visited the Singhal kingdom in disguise and saw her in the temple. He asked for her hand, but he was refused. In desperation, he and his followers attacked the fortress, but all were captured by Gandharvsen's forces. As Rathee was about to be executed, his people revealed his identity. Gandharvsen then married Padmavati to Rathee. Both came back to Chittor. Rathee banished a Brahmin courtier, Raghav Chetun, for fraudulently winning a contest. Padmavati gifted Raghav her bangle to placate him. Unhappy Raghav went to the court of Alauddin Khalji in Delhi. When asked about the bangle, he describes the unmatched beauty of Padmavati. This enticed Alauddin, and he marched towards Chittor, besieged it, and demanded Padmavati for himself. Rathee rejected the demand, offering to pay a tribute instead. Alauddin rejected the offer, and the siege continued. Finally, as part of the fresh terms of peace, Rathee invited Alauddin as a guest inside the fort. Alauddin deceitfully caught a glimpse of Padmavati. In the meantime, Rathee secretly sent Padmavati out of siege. Alauddin Khilji attacked Chittor and captured Rathee. Padmavati somehow freed her husband from the captivity of Alauddin Khilji. During Rathee's captivity, the Kumbhalner ruler Devpal proposed marriage to Padmavati. On his return, Rathee learned about this insult and decided to punish Devpal. In the ensuing single combat, Rathee and Devpal killed each other. Meanwhile, Alauddin, finding Rathee escaped from his prison, returned to Chittor. Facing a certain defeat, Padmavati, along with other women of the fort, committed suicide by jauhar, which was an Indian tradition of mass self-immolation to protect their honor, while the men fought to death. In the end, Alauddin captured an empty fortress, thus deprived of his prize, for which he had attacked the Chittor kingdom and killed thousands of people.